That's right, I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's fine.
It's all right. Mr. Jones, Mr. Chair,
I just crossed my feet.
as Chair of the Finance Committee.
Hold on.
I love how we all get along so.
Beautiful things. We are ready. Let's turn this video on. We are live streaming.
Very nice.
Very good.
It is 5:15 and I would like to call to order the meeting of the Children's Services Council of Leon County's Finance and Budget Committee. Ms. Snyder, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Superintendent Hannah,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell.
Here. Thank you. Before we approve the agenda, I want to, well, actually,
What are you doing?
no, so here's. Yes, are there any changes to the agenda, Mr.
Yes.
Chair?
Mr. Chair, I would like to. Here.
Move item 6.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move item 6 to item 5,
Yes, sir.
such that we can deal with the recommendation coming from General Counsel regarding Scientia.
Very nice. I have a motion to move item 6 up on the agenda to item 5 because it's my understanding that Mr. Jones and Mr. Hannah have yes, for two very good purposes. Without objection.
Is there a second?
Oh, what did you say, Mr. Hannah?
I will, I'll second.
Okay. Without objection, show the agenda altered to make item number 6, item number 5. So with that, I guess item 4 is general public comment. Is there?
You gotta adopt it.
I'm sorry.
Full agenda.
Okay, so with item 6 swap to 5 and 5 to 6, if I could get a motion on the agenda.
I move the amended agenda.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Johnson, without objection, show the agenda. Okay. Is there general public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, without general public comment, let's take up the action item. If you remember, at the last board meeting, the board asked that the finance committee take a look at the issue regarding the summer feeding program performed by Scientia. And Mr. Springer, I'm not sure if it's you or Mr. Rowe who went, like I said, Mr. Springer, I'm gonna look to you to sort of take this item, sort of lay it out, and then the responsibility of the members of this committee will be to make a recommendation to the full board at the next board meeting as to what action we would like to take.
Thank you. So I was at the last meeting of the full council on September 19th. That included the agenda of February 2024, where it kind of laid out the factual background that staff and Scientia had gone through over roughly the past year. So the takeaway from the last full council meeting was committee consider whether to pursue litigation or some other course of action against Scientia. So after that meeting, Scientia representative did reach out to the executive director of me. He forwarded that email to me and said, please work with our general counsel. So I spoke a couple of times with the Scientia representative after advising him. I'm not your lawyer, we represent the council. So in advance of this meeting, I invited him to, I said, you probably saw the September 19th meeting, it's going to happen on October 3rd. please take this opportunity to weigh in. So he sent a letter, which I believe the committee members should have, that's dated September 30th, which sets forth financial position. Also, you should have a draft complaint which sets forth what a lawsuit would. So, letter from Scientia, the alternative to litigation. There are two, and this is on page 3 of his letter, which is, number one, he proposes engaging an independent auditor, and that's, I'm not sure whether that's really much of an alternative. But the second proposal is a consideration of a monthly payment arrangement where they would propose to make monthly payments of $600 until the end of December, or quarterly payments of $1,500 until the end of 2029, or quarterly payments of $1,500 until the end of 2031. So I'm not on the finance committee, but I think that's just a math problem. You could do the present value of those payment streams and figure out which is a more attractive offer. I think it would be the quarterly payments, if my math is right. But again, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a lawyer. And then you'd have to discount that by the risk of the entity not being in existence until the end of 2029 or the end of 2031. But if we went that route, what that would look like legally is write up a settlement agreement. Then you would have a new contract between the council and Scientia that you could hold them to. If they breach that agreement, then you have a cause of action for the breach of the settlement agreement. That's a different cause of action that you see in the draft complaint, which is for breach of the 2023 agreement. So those are the options. If we went forward with the complaint, most of the work is done to draft the complaint, right? So, so that's the sunk cost. Very likely, since they did not, they did not have resources to hire a lawyer to talk to me before this meeting. Because they are a corporation, they cannot appear pro se or on their own behalf in court, they would have to hire a lawyer. So the likelihood of them not appearing and just getting a default judgment is probably more likely than not. So we could get to a judgment point probably pretty quickly and without a whole lot of additional expenditure. And to put a number on it, you probably spent less than $1,000 to get here between me looking at the Scientia person, me drafting the complaint. It's there. We could probably get to a judgment if they don't appear another $1,000 with the motion practice and all that. So you spend an additional $2,000, an additional $1,000. The ultimate challenge is if you've got a party, what we talked about at the full council meeting, what lawyers call judgment proof, that a judgment is not worth anything if you cannot collect on it. So that's what you're balancing, is how much to spend, or another layperson way of thinking about it is throwing good money after bad. So, you could get a judgment that could be pursued and maybe or maybe not collected on, or you could get a settlement agreement, either one of these two forms of settlement agreement. If that's breached in the future, you may or may not be able to collect on that. But I think those are the options. So between, September 19th and now, I think we've at least succeeded in fleshing out some alternatives to litigation. It would be the form of settlement agreement. Maybe these terms could be negotiated a little bit more between now and the full council meeting. But if you want a non-litigation path, it would be draft a settlement agreement with some payment plan. Hold them to that payment plan in the future, ideally for as long as you can until it's satisfied. And that would be the alternative.
Yeah. No, good. Question.
So- With it being a not-for-profit with a board, is it a not-for-profit with a board or is it a private health company?
It is a nonprofit corporation.
So it's not about, I mean, what liability do the owners or the board members have for this indebtedness?
Presumptively zero, so there's a part of the law which is called piercing the corporate veil, but your contract is with the corporation, not with the individuals. So if we got a judgment, it would be against the corporation. And again, if the corporation has no assets, then your judgment isn't worth much. There are ways to go behind the corporate veil and get to individuals. That's a very high hurdle under Florida law. We kind of see any evidence in what I've seen so far that would get us over that hurdle.
And what is the final amount that for which this payment plan was?
Well, what we drafted the complaint for, based on the information that was before the council last time, is in round numbers 59,365, just shy of 60. If my math is right, their proposed plans, the monthly payment plan would be 37,800, and I just on my phone tried to do the present value of that. I think that's 31,000. The quarterly payment plan, I think, is 43,500. The present value of that would be 34,700. So that seems like the more attractive plan. The risk is they have to stay in business for two more years, but neither of their proposed settlements is for the full amount that the council has calculated as due. So you're not only compromising the amount, you're stretching out the payment over time.
And my last question would be, are we permitted to negotiate a value less than that which was been given them of CSC funds?
I would say yes, because you have a cause of action now, so parties are free to compromise cause of action. It would be prudent to do so, because again, thinking of that number when your real number might be zero if they have no assets, it's probably somewhere between 60,000 to zero. So I think it's prudent to come up with a number that's collectible.
And potentially enforceable by a legal writ.
Yes, that if we reduce it to a settlement agreement, and then if they didn't follow through on the settlement, you would have a cause of action for breach of that new contract. Right now, this complaint is for the breach of the 2023 contract. If we went to settlement route, we'd form a new agreement. If they didn't follow through on the settlement, you could sue them for breaching that agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
And I just don't recall if we've talked about this before, but has anyone looked to see if there's a public 990 on this entity to see what the financial status of them would have been, at least of the last published 990?
We have that.
In the September 30th letter, there's references to the midsummer report being submitted on July 14th and approved without noncompliance. Are we in agreement with that?
What I will agree to is that they did submit their midsummer report. They only had salaries. They reported 52,000, 41,000 of which was substantiated and paid with our funding. We could show that. We had no jurisdiction over the overage because they could have another, they could have had another source of funding that did that. At the time, they contacted us, and we have emails to show that, because they were not going to make payroll on that Friday after they submitted their report. After speaking with the chair, and we did have the documentation that substantiated the 41,000, all of it matched up. We agreed that that was a
Okay.
good report, and she agreed to do a counter check.
And was there a subsequent status report submitted at all, or that's where we are now?
They
and
were
they're
only
telling-
required to do
to
two
for
reports,
that.
midsummer and final.
And I think my last question on this is, they make some recommendations. Is there any contractual required mitigation, like, this is telling them telling us to get an independent auditor to look at their expenses, basically, and it's not required in a contract for us.
It is not.
No,
No,
it's not copper.
and just if I can, that stack, that is everything regarding that entity. And we went through those with several factors.
And then finally, and then I will stop, I apologize, but so if we went the route of filing the complaint and assume that we got a favorable judgment against them, would the court be responsible for stipulating a payment agreement if one was necessary? Or we would put a demand based on,
No, so the court issues a judgment, so you get a judgment, and then the party is then responsible for enforcement. Sheriff's office, if it comes to you need to enforce a law, it's the sheriff's office, not the court. And you typically, the ultimate sanction is to seize and sell assets and reduce them in cash and pay your judgment, which is why if they have no assets, it's not worth it. So, but the court is not involved in enforcing judgment. The court issues the judgment, and then the parties work out. You can make a demand, you can put a lien, judgment lien. That's the leverage that the
Right.
judgment creditor has. But as far as dictating or forcing any kind of plan to pay the judgment, that's not the court's business.
So a couple of comments. One, they seem to be sending two signals. So on page 3, a discrepancy has since arisen regarding the classification of certain funds. We want to reaffirm that all funds allocated for the summer camp were spent fully and appropriately in strict accordance with our agreement. So they say that on one hand, and then on the other hand, they said, but we're willing to pay you money and settle. So if you're willing to pay money and settle, then you're leaving your argument that you didn't do anything wrong. What I'm also confused about in the next paragraph, they're saying this discrepancy may have resulted from a misunderstanding about the categorization of funds. And then a follow-up check for $87,000 intended to cover payroll and other expenses was issued and signed by the executive directors at youth
And the chair,
and the chair, which was
Xander.
Sandra.
Sorry, Dr. Glenn.
Okay. Use of a physical check rather than electronic deposit used previously may have contributed to the confusion in the accounting process and potentially lead. So they're claiming this discrepancy and they didn't do anything wrong. But then in the end, they're saying, oh, by the way, if we did something wrong, we're willing to settle, right? Which to me leads me to believe they know they did something wrong. Why would you settle if you didn't do anything wrong? Going after bye-bye, nice one. You know how many employees they have, 2, 3?
And then they hired people for the summer program, which is totally permissible.
Right.
Again, to clarify, they were issued the second disbursement because the first report was accepted. There was nothing wrong with it. They asked if they could get the disbursement early because they were not going to be able to make their payroll that next day.
They were overcommitted.
They were overcommitted. And so they had already spent the money they had on payroll, which was permissible. They hadn't gotten into the program yet. So Dr. Glenn did not want them in a situation where they were going to miss payroll and people had worked. So she agreed to do I'm calling it a counter check, but a physical check versus us going through our bill.com so that they could deposit it and then move forward with their programming without people missing payroll. So I want to classify that. It wasn't that, oh yeah, everything was great and we gave you money. No, everything was okay, but he acquiesced so that you wouldn't have people out there going to the food pantry because you didn't do.
So usually before we get to court, before we ever get to trial, the judge will mandate that we seek mediation and that we try to negotiate a compromise before the judge ever rules on a case. Would that be the same here? The judge would say, look, y'all need to try to work this out first, and if you can't work it out, then we'll go to trial? Or
Yes, if they appear, because that comes later in the case, if they default, we get default judgment, you don't get to that point. So that is the mandatory mediation comes later in the litigation process.
Any more questions?
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Wait.
my concern, and maybe it shouldn't be my concern, is the likelihood of their ability to repay. Like any not-for-profit, they don't have unreserved monies that are free. They secure grants like any other not-for-profit, so those grants, any additional monies they secure, they can't then obligate to make this payment. They are probably not generating any profits because of the nature of the work they do. It's a group of engineers who I know most specifically are in our schools providing additional science instruction at our local schools, our elementary and middle schools. And I wonder if we enter into an obligation like this, what is the likelihood that they'll even be able to? And so this almost would appear to me to be a Pyrrhic victory. And if that's the case, that's not worth a hill of beans. And so I mean, I don't know if we want to negotiate further or find out further what would be their plan if we were to enter this, that what would be their methodology of repayment? Will they collect monies from their board members? I don't know, maybe have barbecues. I don't know, but what I don't want to do is to go into the court to secure a judgment that we already know in advance they cannot commit to or complete seems specious to me. So
That's an understandable view. I would say that whether you entered into a settlement agreement now, or if you got a judgment and it was a fast and expensive default judgment, and then you're negotiating a settlement agreement and payment plan on the judgment, that can come at either point. You would have a stronger position in a sense, because you would then have a judgment amount, or, theoretically enforceable judgment amount, not just a threatened cause of action. But the big variable here is, and you identified it, Dr. Jones, is the ability to pay. That doesn't get solidified by getting a judgment. If they can't pay now, they won't be able to pay in 2 months either.
I have some questions, but I want to make sure that everybody, yep. Mr. Johnson?
Well, no, you go.
Ms. Green, how much was this total contract for?
171.
1.75%. It is 175, 279.86.
So we entered into a contract with somebody for $175,000. The first part of the first half of the contract, which we do with all of our providers, we pay them money up front. Everything's rocking and rolling, we make a second payment. Everything was rocking and rolling, so we did make the second payment. We made a special accommodation, $175,000. Keep that in mind. It's a lot of money. Is anybody from Scientia here? Just out of curiosity. Okay, so we had somebody who we gave $175,000. This is what they think of us. They didn't even show up here, knowing that this was going to be considered. Ms. Green, how much time did you and your staff spend going through all of this, doing everything you could to determine what part of the contract did they not live up to, and what the dollar amount associated with that? How much time would you say?
About 200 hours.
Okay. So here's my view. One, I'm offended. I'm offended that, like anything, in life, you enter into partnerships with people who oftentimes will disappoint you. Sometimes they thrill you. We have been very fortunate in 3.5 years that we have only entered into one contract where they disappointed us to this level, and that is with this group. The concept of an independent auditor after we spent 200 hours of our staff time, it's already been audited. There is no requirement. I would be completely against that. Mr. Jones, you make a good point. We may not be able to win on this, but here's the reality. It's not our money. It's our neighbor's money. And I have an obligation. I feel a moral obligation to make it very clear that someone took money out of our neighbor's pocket and we want it back. And we are the only body that stands between the folks at Scientia and our neighbor's money. So I have no problem entering into some sort of an agreement where they pay back all the money. I realize that Scientia is probably not going to be around in the year 2087, which seemingly is the only way they're going to be able to pay back the money. But I will, just my personal view, will have a hard time sort of entering into or ignoring this, number one, and entering into some sort of an agreement that doesn't have some teeth in it. Albeit the teeth may not be biting that much because they don't have deep pockets, but that's how I feel personally. But here's what we have to keep in mind as the 4 members of this committee. The board has asked us to consider this with Mr. Springer's guidance and bring back a recommendation. And so, I'm the chair. I'm not making a motion. I'm totally open to further conversation. I think this is a good time for the 4 of us to sort of express how we feel. And then based on all of our feelings, come up with a recommendation that we can bring back to the board for their consideration.
Mr. Mitchell, although I did describe it as a pirate, there has to be a message sent most clearly. One, in terms of our obligation as stewards of these dollars, and as well as to any potential future perpetrators.
Yes, sir.
And so although we work as a body, there's a cumulative lesson for all of us in terms of perhaps how we configure contracts in the future to recapture of any misappropriations of monies, but moving forward. But right now, there has to be some response from the board to recapture the money, whether we can whether it ultimately comes back to us or not, because it has to go on record that we did respond, right? And I'm like you with teeth. I'd like to learn more about the language that Mr. Hanna described in there, such that based upon that explanation, is there any punitive options associated with the recapture of those monies, to include potential debarment, where they are no longer allowed to operate? I know that is one of the tools that we use, city and the county. And so I'm with you. I want to recapture and I want to have teeth in it. And then I want to make certain that that we move forward, that it is most clear where we stand on this type of matter.
Mr. Hanna, I'm
So,
sorry.
Sika, and it's probably, you're not as mystic. Everything was fine and then it wasn't fine, right? And so where did it go off the rails and what wasn't fine the second half of the program?
So that stack are all of the receipts that they submitted to go against the money that they spent.
Right, the 87,000 or whatever.
Right.
Right.
And so the final report reconciles every bit of it. So it even goes back to the beginning to make sure everything is in place. We got redacted receipts, we got receipts, phone bills that were for people that weren't on the payroll, so we had to reject those. We had expenses that were coded to line items that they should not have been coded to. So what we did was, we actually went and looked at all of their expenses and we moved them where they should be to ensure that the coding was as correct as possible, which is not something we're required to do, but we did to try to. And that's part of how we got from the 85 all the way down to the 59. Additionally, when looking at their data, their contract says that they were to serve 200 children. They did not. So they did not serve the number of children that they were supposed to, and they did not adhere to the price per child that they had agreed to. In fact, it ended up doubling. And then of the children that they did serve, 150-ish,
113.
113, we only had data, complete data on 50.
Okay. So I would file a motion, and I'd probably complain. I think that sends the message, and wherever we end up, but at least if we file a complaint, we aren't gonna just settle for 30% of what you really owe us, or 40% of what you really owe us. And I think other people know if this happens, we're gonna file a complaint. We're going to the judge, we're gonna file a complaint, and then we're gonna get back what we can get back.
The other thing is that if we do that, and Mr. Hanna, I'm totally with you on this. It sends a message to any of our future or current providers that we will follow through. Two, I think Mr. Springer is right. We will get a judgment pretty quickly. The other thing, when someone fills out a grant application, more often than not, there is a question in there that asks, got any judgments against you? Any problems with past grantees? They're going to have to answer yes. And this has as much to do with Scientia as it does any other provider of services that the Children's Services Council is going to be working with. And oh, by the way, making sure that they know we're serious. Oh, by the way, it's $60,000 that we are not going to be able to have to give to one of those providers who's actually producing good things. And that's, I think we're sending a whole bunch of messages that are consistently good by following Mr. Hanna's idea. Mr. Johnson?
I would just echo Mr. Hanna's recommendation. A question would be if they were contractually obligated to provide services to 200 people, and if I understood Ms. Snyder, they provided services to 113. Can we extrapolate that then to what they still owe us because the services weren't delivered?
We actually did. When in the
Oh, you
amount,
said, I thought I heard you say that they ended up spending twice per person. What?
it ended up being twice per kid, but we allotted for that in all of our computations and calculations of what we found them to owe us. We put in a lot of work on this.
I feel pretty comfortable with knowing who did the work, that 59,300 and whatever dollars it is a good number. And Springer, one question. If we file this, nobody shows, so we get the judgment. At that point, we still have the opportunity to, if they want to come up with not 2031, but a payment plan, we still have the ability to do that. And once the payment plan has been satisfied, we would remove the judgment, correct? So we are not
Satisfied the judgment. It's not-
okay.
Judgment will still be there, maybe. You
Right.
can file the judgment in the public record. and there's action of judgment. So it's not good for companies or even individuals to have unsatisfied judgments out there because, you know, it's a liability. You make money in the future, this judgment is essentially a lien against any future earnings. So there's an incentive to somehow satisfy the judgment.
Mr. Johnson.
Is there a recommendation coming?
No, I would say what I said before, from a legal perspective, our duty is to make sure we don't file frivolous complaints. We have a good faith basis in fact and law for the complaint. You have a good faith basis in fact and law for this complaint. Lots of people have lawsuits and they choose not to file them. Some people file lawsuits that shouldn't be filed, but that's like a business judgment. Or from a legal perspective, we would stand behind this complaint. And actually, we would be the ones sanctioned if the complaint wasn't good. So that's why we're learning.
I'm trying to offer a motion for my colleagues, right, based upon what you would describe, what you would recommend as our path moving forward, and that would seek a judgment.
That's a business decision, whether to do that, you know.
The legal sufficiency, though,
Yes.
is on our side.
Yes. And I think typically, and I'm not trying to avoid answering the question, because typically what every party has to decide, you know, litigation is expensive and it's painful and all that stuff. That's why most people stay on court system. So, you know, if there's another way to get to an end without doing that's great. The cost, I know Ms. Marksdiller was, and we talked about it last time, as a rule of thumb, usually it would be like a third. That's why, you know, contingency lawyers usually get a third of the judgment. You know, if you're gonna recover $10, but it's gonna cost you $20 to do it, it doesn't make business sense. Like here, I think the cost of getting to the point of the judgment is pretty low. The value of the judgment's gotta be greatly reduced because of the nature of the defendant. But that's, you know, all math and business decisions for dog.
And there is an opportunity cost, as far as I'm concerned, of sending a very clear message to anyone who does business with us that we intend to, you know, hold them to the contract they signed with us.
Right, and for economists and lawyers, what we would call reputational risk.
Yeah.
If it, you know, is preserving good reputation or avoiding bad reputation, you can put a value on that. So when you're deciding whether to mitigate, putting that in the equation is something people will often do.
So would we make a motion to make a recommendation to the entire, okay, so I'll make a motion to make a recommendation to the entire council to file a complaint against this company.
Second.
The motion in the second. In this case, with this Snyder, would you mind calling the roll? Oh, thank you very much. Is there any comment from the general public?
No public comment at this time.
Very nice. Would you call the roll?
Mr. Johnson,
I'm in favor of the motion.
Superintendent Hannah,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yeah.
Mr. Mitchell.
Oh, yes.
Passes.
I just did. Yes, here, yay. Okay, that was the one item that we actually needed Mr. Jones and Mr. Hannah on. The rest of the agenda is not the budget, but really the financial report. And I think that it's really going to be us going through, Mr. Johnson and I, and you're welcome to stay, the current financial report, and John is here and Dina is here. Because we have taken the financial report out of the consent agenda, so it's going to appear as an item each meeting. It will be very quick. I just wanted really the benefit of having Mr. Johnson. He's a CPA. I love having him on this subcommittee and going through it. So it's not just me that is calculating these numbers. So what? I didn't say that about you. Mr. Chair. All right, so we are gonna go to,
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Treasurer.
yes,
So the balance of our budget, the balance of the meeting will be to discuss
the current balance sheet and the financial report.
the formatting of the same.
Right, and not the budget which we've already approved at the trend meeting. And just a reminder that the next meeting date of this committee is December 5th at 5 o'clock.
Thank you, sir.
And good luck on alternative for a good cause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So I would, there's members of the public here, and Ms. Finder, I know that we don't have cards for members of the public, but do we for any of these agenda items?
We do not have any public comments submitted at the time. The cards are available out front. If anybody wishes to make a public comment, please fill out a card and provide it, and we will call at the time of public comment.
Okay, so here's what I'm hoping to accomplish at this point is. Mr. Henna, you had asked a question during the trim notice that we're approving a budget, and I said, yes, we're approving it based on the buckets that money is allocated to buckets. There is nothing that would preclude us giving proper, as long as we give proper public notice of moving funds from one bucket to the other. If we see we have a tremendous need in one bucket and we're not spending all the money that we anticipated or hope to spend in another bucket. And so what has happened through the last 3.5 years is we'll sit here and a member of the council, I remember Dr. Glenn at one point looking at me and saying, we were overspending on a particular, I think it was summer funding this past year. She said to me, well, you said we have the money. And I said, well, we do. But every time you make a decision to spend money here, you're making a decision not to spend money somewhere else later. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for John to walk us through and kind of give us a sense of what kind of money do we have, and where we put money in reserve, have we over reserved in certain categories. A great example is the Family Resource Center. Remember, we budgeted $4 million, I'm going to talk in round numbers, $4 million initially. But so we have reserved $4 million, but we don't necessarily need to reserve the full $4 million, depending on, what the council's future actions are going to be. So this was an opportunity to just kind of pull it all apart, make sure that all four of you, but because Mr. Johnson is new to the committee, had the opportunity to go through these so that when we go to the full committee and item 6 on the agenda is the financial report, and the chair looks at me as the chair of this committee and I say, financial committee is met and we are comfortable with the financial report. I'm here to answer any questions anybody from the public wants to ask or somebody on the council wants to ask. It's set as an agenda item, but it's a quick agenda item unless there's questions that everyone is comfortable with how they're voting, not just me. So with that, John, do you want to? Dina, I don't know who wants to take. Oh, do we have? Okay. But I really would like to take public comment. It's just Liza or are there others?
This is the only public comment we have at this time.
Okay,
Ms.
Okay.
Liza McFadden, please state your name and address for the record.
Liza McFadden, 2617 Marston Road.
and just so you know, we have a 3-minute rule, with limited public comment. If you go over the 3 minutes, you're okay, but be sensitive to the fact that.
I can do
we
this in
do
5
have-
minutes.
All right.
I've spoken to y'all before, several times and of course served on the council. So I, wanted to approach you all, about an issue that's very important to me, and that is the homeless housing, issue. And, one of the things as we've been, thinking this through and is how do we create an opportunity so that this community understands what's really going on with the children who are homeless. And I've been talking to folks from Family Promise, the Big Bend, that operate Hope, which is the only emergency shelter for families between Pensacola and Jacksonville. And they're very interested in coming up with a program specifically for the children that would for the first time measure and have outcomes related to all of the gaps that the Children's Services Council saw when they did their report. So that would be how many meals are served? Are they in school and where are they going to school? Believe it or not, right now they enter, but there's not a requirement that the child be enrolled in school at that time. Tracking that so that we see no academic gain. Tracking, most importantly, where did that child end up? Are they in permanent stable housing somewhere? And so what we'd like to do is be able to say, it's really important that if this is the Children's Services Council, I did say when I was up here before that I would look it up what other Children's Services Councils are doing in this arena. And to be quite frank, there's not a lot of work in this arena. Other Children's Services Councils, I don't think have done a lot here. They've done a little bit of wraparound, I've found, in a couple of places, but that's about it. This would be a fully new opportunity to really engage in a big way and look at, how can we make a difference for children?
Thank you.
3 minutes.
I'm curious, this is an expert, you're an expert in this area. Other children's services councils, other counties who are struggling with, I think all counties are struggling with the homeless problem. Do you know how others are finding creative ways to fund programs specifically for children and families, which is what our mission is?
I actually did an analysis in Florida several years ago to look at this and found that they are very heavily reliant, it's not going to come as any surprise to anybody here, on grants. They are traditionally city and county grants with a very high dose of federal grants. Federal grants typically are helping in the homeless arena, but they're primarily for veterans, number one. There's very little that is for the families. And there's a lot out there right now, and you can see with both presidential candidates to say how we're going to build more affordable housing. I think to answer your question, some of the most innovative opportunities are if we build more affordable housing and you make some profit there, can that profit get pushed back in to support the emergency shelters that where traditionally don't want to charge families because the only reason they're there is because they have nowhere else to go. I think one of the things people don't understand about families going into emergency shelter is about 50% of them are working. Many of these are mothers who have gone through domestic violence. So they are in for a shorter period of time. It's not the same as shelters that take in individual adults. The rates of mental health and so forth are high, but not nearly as significantly high. So there's more of an opportunity to work with these families, help them create a plan, we call it usually a housing stability plan, raise money while they're staying at the shelter so they have enough for a first month's down payment and can move on.
One last question for you. The Hope Center that is meant for children and families. Is there the ability to determine with certainty that the families and the children there are Leon County residents?
Yes, as of October 1, they only accept Leon County residents. I know that they had a conversation due to the hurricane. They went back to their intake folks and said, are we getting calls from Franklin or any of those other counties yet? The answer is no. I think right now Red Cross is stepping up and putting people in hotel spaces. So they have not seen that, and it is 100% Leon County.
So Mr. Hammond, I'm sorry.
So I will say this, I visited the Family Trauma Center, I was on the Big Bend Homeless Coalition Board a number of years ago. There's a long waiting list for parents and children to get in. We even have a situation where one of our employees has single father with 2 school-age daughters. Found was living in one of our schools. Couldn't get in. So the pain is real. I mean, this issue is an issue. So we kind of wrapped our arms around him and these poor girls, but had we not intervened, we just stumbled upon it. They're living in the office of the school. So but I don't have a solution. I wish I did. I just don't. I think that's what we're all searching for. What do we do? Which responsibility is it? It's all of our responsibilities, but I'd love to hear what other innovative things that the other communities are doing to deal with this. It can't be just us.
Well, I did make an offer the last time I was here to do a little bit more research and maybe update that study I did a few years back. So I've been able to do that for the council and come back at a later date and answer that question.
If I could add, definitely in concert with the city and the county, because we have been working with them for the last 2 years, understanding that there is no state or federal money for emergency health. It all comes, the expectation is that it's going to come from local government. And so we've tried to work with them in some of the budget proposal programming that we put in there. And so as we're looking at it, I think definitely making sure that they are involved to ensure that we're getting not just the family picture, but there are 4 shelters that deal with children and families. There are 5 in the city, 4 of them deal with children and families.
The kind of important thing is, one, the Leon County resident. That's a requirement of the statute that created us and then what the voters said. So I appreciate your answer that these are Leon County residents. So Leon County tax dollars would only go. 2, you'll remember that first workshop we had with the dots. There were 2 items. One, the early childhood was first and then some. The second one was this issue of homelessness. And we really haven't, as a council, tackled it yet. The final thing I'll say is to Ms. Green's comment that we have put money into our budget, just as a placeholder. We have no solutions yet. So Ms. McFadden, if you're able to bring back more information that the council could then sort of make a determination of how do we work with the county and city and the Children's Services Council. It is certainly part of our our core mission. But I do think that this is, I think it's such an important issue. I really do. And, Mr. Hanna, the idea that a single dad and his 2 kids are living in a school. One, thank goodness there's a school there for them, but I'm a dad, I cannot imagine what that father must have been going through and trying to explain to his kids. So I appreciate you coming, Mr. Fadden. And just know this, that that budget that we just passed has a placeholder for programs that are like this, especially if you can come back and the city and the county, Ms. Green, you can work with them and Ms. McFadden.
I've already worked with them on, so in the budget, there is some money that is specifically for that partnership with the city and the county. Then there is some other money that this council can decide where you want to direct it.
Well, the final thing we should remember, and Commissioner Cummings has been very good at pointing this out. The CHSP funding that includes funding for homelessness, they re-upped, but just like all funds, they re-upped this time, after a 2-year cycle. There's really only 1 year left of it. We're in the first year, so there's 1 year left of it. If we're going to do something creative, and it's going to include the Children's Services Council for children and families in Leon County who are Leon County residents, we have to start doing something now. You know, and it has to be with someone who we are confident that we're gonna give them $175,000 and we're gonna get $176,000 in services in return. So thank you for coming. You know, there's other speakers. Okay, all right. So Dina, John and I do this, you know, and have done it on many different occasions. So I always start by saying, you guys take it from here. Why don't you take it from here?
Good evening, everyone. I think the easiest thing to do is turn to the most recent financials, which is August 31st, 2020. Okay, and to look at.
So that everybody go, Mr. Grayson, the page we're on when you. Okay, which one? I page 11, right here. Okay,
Yes.
page 11. Okay, so the public's reading right along with us. It's riveting. From this point forward, oh, who needs Netflix? You need a budget committee. Go ahead, Mr. Grayson. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it confined to our assets and what we have and what's going on. So you look at the several different accounts. You've got the operating account, the money market account, which is where we keep money just when we need to pay bills, it's transferred to our operating account. Then our excess funds are in this Florida class account. Some of them are reserved, catastrophe and contingency, which we maintain at a percentage of the budget and will move up with the adoption of next year's budget. They will either move up or down depending on the budget. The next two, general is operational funds and program, as it states, is programmatic funds. Okay, so layperson would look at this and say, why do you have $6 million in programmatic fund sitting somewhere drawing interest? The question is, the answer to the question is that the majority of this fund is encumbered or reserved for programmatic purposes that have already been approved for payments during the remainder of this year, okay, or for our next fiscal year. But the funds have already been approved, right? So look at that, can be somewhat of a misnomer to look at it like that.
Mr. Grayson, a good example of that would be the Family Resource Center that has, obviously, our fiscal year begins on October 1. We have a contract with them that goes through December 31. So some of this, and we have a committed amount. Some of what looks like, you know, what the heck is this? It's that money that goes through December 31 of 2024, right?
That is correct. Not only that, other programs that go through September 25.
Yes, right. I just want to, that's just an example.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think the next thing to do, I think that the next page, let me see, I'm looking at a different. Skip over to page number 14, okay? Because this shows our income expense budget to actual, October through August. We're 1 month short of the fiscal year. When you look at this, and in particular, if you'll turn to the third page of this report.
So 16?
So my pages are numbered because I'm using my own, 17.
17.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it's gonna be,
Oh, you're,
the
no,
numbers are.
no, hold on.
17.
Let's back up.
Oh, 19.
Income statement, which is here. So that would be 12.
13, I'm sorry, 12 and 13, okay? And in particular, on page,
The income statement, the budget to
Budget
actual.
actual.
Yeah, budget to actual.
in particular, on the second page, 13, when you get down to program investments and support total, you will see that thus far this year, $4.6 million has been spent out of that budget line. However, the budget was 7.4, 7.5 million. So we're still 2.8 million in this year's money that is to be spent. Now, will that all be spent in this fiscal year? Probably not,
There'll be about $500,000
but
that is not spent.
but it is encumbered, okay? Just like some of the money on the balance sheet. So that would be my synopsis of where we are and what's going on as far as the funds that we have, that this is something that always comes up, the funds that we have on account and how they are obligated, how they're going to be expended. So I'm hoping that this was a prelude to open it up for any other questions that might come up.
Well, I have one question. I'm on page 13, under the program investments and supports total. That's kind of what we're all about. We have spent 4.6 million. What you're saying is we've actually will spend for services that go through September 30th of 2024. There's $2.1 million still out there that
It's
That's
actually
About,
2.8. Some of that probably planned to be spent this fiscal year, but
more like
it's rolling
2.2.
2.2. I'm just looking at the amount under
Yeah.
budget.
Right, so if I can jump in.
Yeah.
So of the under budget, 2.87, there's gonna be about 2.2 that will be spent, paid out in September. That was paid out in September. We did have a few programs that did not spend all the money that they were allocated, so that'll be, we won't know until that final report comes in. This also contains a programming for family supports, which were 2-year contracts. So those are being paid out as well. So because we do this report, we show this, John, is it a cash basis that we show this report?
Yes.
It's a cash basis and a month behind. It looks as if, oh, we're gonna be under 2.8 million. That's not necessarily true. When we see the September financials, we'll know what we're actually under. We were anticipating about 508,000 when we forecasted out for the year when we were doing the budget. It will probably come in a little bit higher because, for example, First T isn't going to use their whole allotment. Safe Families for Florida had to turn money back in. So we had several programs that, for several reasons, either were really efficient and didn't use all of the money, or it turned out that they just didn't have all the expenses that they thought they were gonna have.
In this bucket then is, so I'm just looking at the number, 2.8 million. In that bucket is, you're saying 2.3 million is likely to be spent. But part of that 2.3 million is for contracts that will go in fiscal year 24-25.
Some of it,
Okay,
yes.
do you know ballpark how much that would be?
Maybe about, Dina has it on the spreadsheet.
She
How
has
about that?
it.
I'm over here, yeah, she has it on the
So
spreadsheet.
if I may, with the family supports, family strengthening parent education, the total awarded was about 2.285 million. And we have actually dispersed out approximately 1.1 million. So you're looking at that balance being of about 1 million left for those programs to continue providing services through fiscal year 24-25, because their contracts do not end until September 30th.
Mr. Hammond, do you remember in our last, it was the last meeting? This would, your questions were all about this and how much money was left and how much. So the reason I just kept wanting to drill down is so that you have a sense of really don't be fooled by the number. It's not as big as it looks, and that goes for the general public as well. We're not sitting on a whole bunch of cash.
It would be a lot easier to the eye if the contracts match the fiscal year, but that doesn't happen and we can't expect that to work like that.
Yeah, and we have tried to do that. And it just, between the state fiscal year and the nonprofits fiscal year and the academic year, we just cannot get them all to match up so that, right. That being said, though, I will say that I'm very confident that we have a very good grasp of the money that has gone out, how much is left, what it will take to continue funding those contracts, and trying to estimate what our providers are gonna need. So I feel confident that we've got a handle on that. I know that sometimes it's hard to look at the numbers though, and as you said, you say, oh, they're sitting on a whole lot of money. No, we're not. So with this budget that you all just approved and trimmed, that is all new money, all new programs. None of that goes to any of the programs that we have already funded.
Mr. Johnson?
I was thinking, and I'm remembering my first council meeting when Superintendent Hannah spoke and said, we've grown to a point, I'm paraphrasing probably a little bit, but we've grown to a point where we need to know what our commitments are for the balance of the year and what the commitments are going to be on this year's funds that carry over into a subsequent year. And so, Mr. Grayson, as I've been thinking about that, I know we're on a cash or a modified cash basis on these interim financial statements, but because when we enter into contracts, that creates the obligation for the CSC. What level of additional effort would it be so that the liability section of our balance sheet could be further delineated so that we could see current liabilities and long-term liabilities, meaning that you would have a snapshot then of what the obligations are of the organization that remain over, a 12-month period with a traditional definition of a current liability, and then at least have some sense for what the long-term liability that represents a commitment that the council has made that would extend beyond the balance sheet day.
That's an excellent idea and that's doable. And even
It sounds like Dina has it in a sense.
we do a lot of things on spreadsheets, but if you want it here, we can put it here. But the spreadsheet might be the way to go,
Well,
but
So I do think, I think it's gonna take a little more explaining. Not each meeting, but to begin with, what you're seeing, but really. This was what the superintendent, was, I don't wanna say you were frustrated by, but it was very confusing and. There are some people who look at a budget, who don't really care that it does what Mr. Johnson and Mr. Hannah want. They just wanna make sure, hey, everything's okay, which is why it went into the consent agenda, why I felt terribly uncomfortable. I want everybody to know what's out there. The nice thing is that from a stewardship standpoint, the money that before Sika approves a payment, it's sitting in an investment account, earning a very nice yield. So we're doing everything right while at the same time representing it for those who just want to make sure we've got enough money in the account to pay the bills, satisfies them, but also to Mr. Johnson and Mr. Hannah's desire, and candidly mine as well. Having it both ways, I think would be nice.
Mr. Johnson, question for you. You know that if we put these liabilities on here, we list them down, right? The situation that comes is that they change over time. And I end up with my account list of current and long-term liabilities gets so long. Some of them go away, some of them remain. So I'm wondering if the council wants to see it on the balance sheet, or do they want to see the gross numbers on the balance sheet and the detail on the spreadsheet? I'm trying to capture how.
I'm not sure, but as a council member, I'd like to be able to sit down and look to know what is truly unrestricted.
Okay.
Well, on behalf of both the finance committee and when we're at the council, because if we're, if we're having discussions over the next big round of grants, I can't look at what we get right now and know clearly that we have the capacity to commit those funds.
I'm following. We'll work on it.
We'll work on it because I think we have a good framework already started at the behest of our treasurer.
Yep.
Where we have basically a spreadsheet that shows from the time we started funding, what monies went out, what went over, the carry forward. I think everything that you're requesting, and maybe it's some combination of the two to ensure that periodically we are updating you all as council members on what money is encumbered. So that you can really see.
In particular, and we get this next allotment of income revenue to the council, there could very likely be some of those funds that we have some commitment to already. It's what I want to be careful about. You're saying we don't have any commitment to any of those funds yet. I understand council has not taken any action on it, but the thing I got to make sure is that we haven't inherently done that because we're, in a week or so, we're going to have a discussion about the family resource centers, and it's got more commas and zeros in it than we've historically been dealing with. And I can't look here and go, well, on one hand, it says we've got 9.2 million of unrestricted net assets in equity. Well, I don't think that's accurate really, because we've got commitments that we've made,
Right.
that our other council members may look at that and say, well, we've got 9.2 million of unrestricted net assets. Let's fund these folks.
And the reality is, some of that is restricted.
It is restricted.
And Dina and John and I, again, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because it was the three of us sitting in a conference room, basically going through this, which is why the spreadsheets exist. And I thought, I just want I want the burden to be shared, with the full council, but definitely the rest of the finance committee.
Well, I get it.
So, I'm
Yeah,
certainly
I
willing to
understand.
be a sounding board on
Absolutely.
any of those ideas as they come up and certainly want to be respectful of the chairman of that as any of those discussions happen. I did have another.
Yes.
So just on general, it was at the last council meeting, I think I raised the question of pulling the financials out of consent. But then I thought it would be helpful if we had some structure around a variance analysis that accompanied the financial statements. And I just haven't had enough bandwidth to come up with what that is. What I know I don't want is every $5 explained that's over or under budget, but there's got to be some threshold, whether it's $10,000 or, something as a starting point where there's a financial summary given to the finance committee and to the council that would provide some explanation about variances that we're seeing.
That budget to actual and that percent variance dollar rate.
It doesn't, it tells me an absolute dollar amount, but I wouldn't know, as Sika would, just intuitively know, well, there's one particular grantee that's not going to spend $100,000 of their, whatever the dollar amount is.
For some narrative to go with.
Some narrative to go with, the narrative to go to the absolute dollars. I think would be very helpful, at least for me. I think others as well.
No, so absolutely. And again, I always start by saying I was an English major. I do know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And so the narrative could work. I was gonna ask the question, is there any other organizations? I don't know if maybe this would be to Mr. Hanna. When you deal with a variance report, what is that variance where you want a little bit of context on, like what threshold have you seen? Is it $10,000? Is it $5,000?
Yeah,
Is
we,
A percentage?
we just now started doing that at the request of a board member. But it's much larger, Chris.
You do have.
Because you have a much larger budget.
$250,000.
So if you're over or under 250?
If you're over 250, they want an explanation of what is this.
How about if you're under? No problem.
They just ask for anything over to the 200 or 250.
It's gonna be a good state. We don't have anything on it.
Well, that's a big, but I love.
It's a $9 million budget versus a $600 million budget.
Yeah.
I will say this, and again, this is a great conversation because as Sika, you were mentioning, I know we're gonna have, I forget which programs they were, First Tee is gonna return some. I hate using the term. I have a debit card. And the debit card is an account I have with my bank that if I get expense checks from my firm, anything, it's my Mad Money account, right? It's money that I use just the debit card to pay for lunch or something like that. I would like to say, I don't want a separate account, but I would like to see, as we're getting money, as money is not being expended and is being returned, that to me is almost a Mad Money account for, and again, I don't want to use Mad Money because that suggests that we're
It's
spending
available.
it. Yeah, that if a special project comes up, or we want to enter into a partnership or a sponsorship, instead of having the SIPS funding, we have a pot that hasn't been expended in that current fiscal year, that the council could be told, we have $37,000 in this, and we welcome the community come talk about a program sitting here. So a program at Hope, or a program for moms at Breon. I mean, that to me, that's where we as council members have some input. Otherwise, it's just big amount here, big amount there. It's not a huge amount of money because we don't get that much return, but it's enough that I think that the council may like to see it and just kind of keep track of it.
So one of the things we can do is also, and you actually are the person that has influenced me on this. With our FO class account, we can make as many sub-accounts as we want.
Right.
We could create a sub-account where we put recaptured funds in or unused funds and report on that periodically. It's gaining interest while it's sitting in there, and then it's available for just what you're, so it would be
Well, Mr.
another
Springer's
line.
gonna get a 60 grand, so that can just start.
There would be another line in there, but that would just to satisfy that, then we have that, showing, and maybe we would call it recaptured available funds.
Yeah, well, but usually you budget through the course of the year, and then whatever monies come back is basically your unrestricted fund balance, and then it rolls back into your plus your revenue is your new budgeted amount for the next year, right? So
That's our rollover.
if you have like all these items you budgeted for, if $350,000 comes back at the end of the year, that plus whatever revenue you generate for the next year is then the total amount you can budget for that fiscal year.
Right.
But if again, I'm gonna use Dr. Glenn because she's not here. When she said, do we have the money? If there is along the way, as we're in a current fiscal year, Sika has somebody that comes to her with something that's unique and needs consideration, or a board member, a council member hears about something that needs consideration. Doesn't mean we're actually funding it, but we take it up for consideration, and we know that we sort of have this running fund. By the way, my debit card, it rolls over. I don't spend it all. And it surprises me every time I look at it, I'm like, I have more money in that than I do my checking account. That mad money grows, and so it's not a spending account necessarily, but it is an account that I keep funds in.
If you'll go to page 27 in your packet, while we're not gonna talk about, I think we're gonna end up tabling this. I do want to bring your attention to, on page 27, which is the last page of the proposed budget. You all approved just the overall budget. If you go to page 27, at the bottom, you'll see a green section that says new funds available for programming. In essence, go all the way to the back. This is in the budget, so it looks like this. All the way to the back.
It's your big sheet.
Miles,
It's your-
This
your
is-
big-
you'll have-
it's your big-
Oh, it's your big seat. I'm sorry.
Mike,
So it's your big seat.
at the end of the science, don't bring me back
Look
there
at
again.
page 2.
Okay.
And so what we have done is we have the proposed funding for these are programs that we're proposing. And if you see at the very bottom, you'll see 175,943. That's money that we aren't proposing anything to be done. And so every year we do have that, and that's even something that we can keep up with. So I think we have several ways we can accomplish what we want for sure, and what Mr. Johnson is suggesting, and I believe to be very as well. To get us where we want to be with the reporting so that the council has a very good handle on money that's come in, money that has been encumbered, that's restricted, and that's available for maybe some things that are brought to us.
And think about this, gentlemen, the Helene. If you were looking at Helene 6 hours before it landed, it was coming right at Tallahassee. I know we have money built in for emergency funds, but I promise you, we would have gone through if Helene hit here, we would have gone through all those, and it would be nice to know that, the mad money account, which is 174 plus whatever is being returned, existed, so that, it gives me great comfort. Or, I don't know, we decide we want a partnership with the city and county on a homeless program, and there's money here. Or there's a huge need for single moms with, you know, with kids who need help. This to me is if this were a family budget, I always put money in savings so that if I'm in a city and I see, let's say you're an art collector, I'm not, but let's just say you are. And you see that beautiful piece of art and you're like, I want to buy it today. It won't be there tomorrow. I've got an account that I've saved money for that one moment in time. And that if I miss that one moment in time, I miss it. I just, you know, I don't want to miss that one moment in time for something that's far more important than art. Not that there's anything wrong with art, but
For me, it would be helpful to know what kind of variance we would. Just start with a number. I don't know what
Is
that
it-
number would be.
French, is
but
it more a dollar amount than
Dollar amount,
percentage?
percentage.
Would it be possible to table that and then let me put some thought to it and then bring it back up?
And in the meantime, what I will commit to doing is a little bit of a narrative that goes along with the financial report. Just under each one, this is under because of this, or this is over because of this, or this, that's not hard.
Looking at it, it may not end up being a dollar amount. I'm looking at capacity building technical support. It's under budget. We've only spent 57%. So an explanation is,
We've only spent
Plausible.
57.
well, but the why?
Right.
So on a going forward basis, this process, I think, will evolve, and it'll evolve to a point where the current committee structure is satisfied with it. And then there will be a new committee and an evolution will occur. But it was incredibly important. Again, we've got two new members of this committee in our chair, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Johnson. And for at least, in my opinion, too long, I just felt like I'm the only one who's got this information in my head, and I don't want to be the only one who has this information in my head. So thank you for allowing me to burden the two of you and Mr. Jones at the appropriate time. But Mr. Johnson and Mr. Hannah, I mean this. If you need to see something, you want to see it done differently, it is simply ask. And, you know, Mr. Grayson and Snyder are so good at responding. He's no longer chair. My Al Haig moment. I'm in charge here. Johnson. You just look like you're about to say something, sorry.
So I didn't have an opportunity to submit to staff some of the questions I had in those August financials. Probably just better do that. I'll shoot an email to them. Okay, nothing.
Okay. I think we're on to something. But I mean this, thank you for when I read your memo and I saw that, I was like, nice job. So thank you very much for that. Okay, let's see, let me go back to the agenda. Number 7 is the next meeting dates.
Well, just because we have number 7 program.
I'm sorry.
and support.
I was on the trend. I apologize. Number 7, is the program investment. Oh,
And so if we're gonna, my understanding.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go into that.
Right.
So we're just.
Okay, so, yeah, because Mr. Jones did have that commitment, and this is programmatic in nature, I essentially committed, like, let's not, there's nothing that's earth shattering here and nothing that will, no child will go hungry or, you know, lose a roof over their head. We can wait till the next meeting.
To talk about program and support investments for this year, you mean?
Yeah, for this fiscal year.
Right, where we already approved the budget. That good year to talk about those items.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Right. More yeah,
Right.
more detail,
Right.
more determination, if you wanna keep the buckets the way they are.
And won't a lot of this come out in our workshop? I mean, is that sort of,
So the workshop is more on the money that, so it's twofold. It's on the FRC, which is money that's already committed, and it's on out of school time, which is money that we're proposing being here, and that's that year round.
okay,
I think the biggest thing in the budget proposal is the 500,000 that would be in partnership with the city and the county. And so entities like Breon is included in that, Family Promise is included in that, just emergency shelter, we're not talking about programming, but just the emergency shelter, Refuge House, and CCYS.
those are the 4 of the 5 you said?
So those are the 4 of the 5. And so this is funding that I've been working with the city and the county, and on a formula basis, that is what we came up with as our part to help contribute to that emergency housing. So that is one piece that I would say can't wait till December, but it could wait until our October meeting.
Okay,
It could wait until the October meeting, even if the council just looked at that one line item and said, yes, we approve that one line item.
well, and the finance committee doesn't need to do it because the money is sitting there.
Right.
It's really, it's a programmatic decision, not a financial decision.
Exactly.
And that will include the 4 members, obviously, of this committee, but the
Full
other 5,
council.
right?
The other piece of that is that the city and the county have already given their commitments.
What is
to
that?
Those 5. So the city and the county, so I'm gonna read it.
Individually.
Yes. So the city, the county, did line item funding as well as the CHSP process. So there was funding that the entities applied for through CHSP. But then the county also did line item funding in addition to that. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
So there's the combined pot for CHSP, that's city and county, and then you're saying the county in
Each of
addition
them.
to that.
Right, the county and city additionally did some line item funding.
So in the pot that's called CHSP.
Mhm.
Is that equal city and county?
So it's all equal.
Okay,
So the line item and the CHSP funding is equal city and county.
so how much is each one committing?
So I'm not gonna talk about the Kearney Center because that doesn't have anything to do with us.
Right.
Okay, so for Hope Community, which is Family Promise, the city and the county will each put in 209,325, and we would put in 312.
Okay, so I'm gonna see if I get this right. City, the one with the biggest bucket of money, is putting in the same amount as the county that has the second biggest pot of money, but both less than the CSC that has the smallest amount of money.
And their reasoning for that is that they are fully funding the Kearney Center. So the city and the county are the only funding sources for the Kearney Center at 416 each.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm.
I'm just
okay.
I'm explaining it to you.
Right.
I'm just explaining,
Because, by the way, they're not, the state is also a big funder,
just from a local government perspective. And then for CCYS, 159,103, city and county, for us, only 94. For Refuge House, 54,843 each, for us, only 25,601. For Breon House, they're each funding 28,269, and for us, a little bit more at 68. So when you look at, so when I looked at this with the city and the county, of course, Family Promise, that's where your families are. That's where those kids are. And so I'll just be transparent. For me, I'm okay with us shouldering a little bit more of that compared to them. Same thing with Breon House. Those are our expectant moms. So I'm okay with us shouldering a little bit more. I do think that it was equitable that they're shouldering more for CCYS for homeless youth and for Refuge House, which are victims of domestic violence, but only about a third of them had children. And so when we looked at the formula, our part is reduced because we would only want to be funding those with children. And when we do that reporting, that is what the expectation is going to show.
just so that I'm clear, the question I asked had nothing to do with how much we were contributing. It had everything to do with how much the city and the county weren't contributing. I'll tell you this, those four organizations that you mentioned, I can assure you that even with our contribution in the county and the city's contribution, will be underfunded. So, all right,
And I will just add, I will just add one more. So the way that the formulas are done, with all of our funding, we would be funding Hope Community about 26% of their overall bed capacity. For CCYS, 3%, Refuge House, 6%, and Breon House, about 3%.
and from each one of these organizations, we could expect one, a commitment that they are Leon County
Yes,
residents.
yes,
Two, that they're going to provide to us data that confirms that they're doing what they said they're gonna do. And each one of those organizations is going to provide us a list of the services, a list of their commitments prior to us voting on. I mean, I get this is a potential recommendation to the full council, but they're gonna provide us that list that we will then say, okay, then we want to fund this for $68,000, and that's
Say-
what.
but, so I need you to
So
clarify.
we're gonna have a contract with them.
Oh, yes. yes,
That
yes,
says, here's your deliverables.
Yes,
You are going to provide, and I just keep going back to this, and I know,
the
please,
contract,
those organizations are nothing like this. But there's gonna be a contract with deliverables.
Yes.
When those deliverables are met, they are funded.
yes. So we are also, as a result of the experience, we are also, while we tried to, listen to our nonprofits, that it is hard for them to float. We would be derelict not to learn a lesson. And so we are going to be moving toward a percentage advance and then reimbursement after that. We had hoped we wouldn't have to do that, but we will be moving in that direction.
Steve, I don't know if you remember during your interview for the position of executive director, I asked this question. You know, and that's probably why I'm more incensed by this than anything. I'm not real worried about the four organizations that we're talking about, but to me, we have to be consistent anyway, so that's a good thing. All right.
Later on, I'll tell y'all about that interview.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, that's $500,000 that was budgeted to cover those expenses that you just mentioned in partnership with the city and the county that I guess you met with and
Yes,
wrote for some type of
for 2 years.
tentative agreement.
Not, I wouldn't say it was an agreement, it was a conversation. And I had talked
We
with the
came back
council.
with dollar amounts, like,
Well, I mean, yeah, but I've always said it. And they are very clear that our council makes that final decision. All I'm recommending, yes, we want to be in partnership, but it is you all's decision, for that. So I try to be very clear. So that would be all I have to say on investments as far as something that might rise up to needing a decision
By the full council.
by the full
Again.
council.
The money has been put aside, the money can be used. It's just a matter of a programmatic standpoint. Does the council want to go forward with the 308,000, the 28,000, 68, whatever those numbers were
It's
that you threw out? Okay. Any more questions, Mr. Hanna?
yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson? Fantastic. Okay, so that was 7? That was.
Yes.
8 is the next meeting date, which is December 5th at 5 o'clock, where Mr. Johnson will send an email to staff with his questions, but also we will hopefully have had enough of an opportunity, Mr. Grayson, for you to sort of come up with a format that you'll. Oh, very nice. Okay. All right. So that will be on the next meeting agenda.
Oh,
Before we get to item 10, there's a gentleman here who I understand is from Scientia, and I don't know if you would like to speak. But if you would, I am all ears.
I would.
With the permission of my fellow committee members.
If I may please ask you to state your name and address for the record, and should I start the timer as public
Yes,
comments?
Yep.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Curry Henry. I am with Scientia. I'm at 5408 Terrain Drive, Tallahassee, Florida. So I wanted to come down because I know that there's been conversation regarding our summer camp of 2023. I apologize for being late. We're in the process of designing new projects for upcoming programs. So I wanted to come down to talk more about, at least to provide you from our standpoint, our position. And so my goal here really is to just provide some clarity from our end as to what took place and what our goals are for the future. So our Scientia is a research and project-based nonprofit. So it's an organization that we founded in the spirit of the service that my father, who was a co-founder of the Bond Community Health Center, has done for the community. From a medical standpoint, we're looking at it from an education standpoint as to what we're trying to achieve. Our goal really is to empower young people into the sciences and technology. I will readily admit, we made some missteps in terms of, it was really we do not do grant funding normally in terms of writing grants or knowing how to follow along. It is a new area for us, and we've already made some changes and updates to our process to assure that the problems we faced before, it will not be done again. There were some issues in terms of our processes that we have rectified. We are an organization, we are in numerous schools. We just started with Bethel Christian Academy. We have the kids learning about, they're doing things on, they learned about the Bohr model. We are at other schools in the community. So I understand that there was from your standpoint, that the funds from our communications with Seeker previously, that the funds that are considered unallowable are funds that should be repaid to you, because yes, we did go over budget with our payroll, because our model of programming training goes throughout the program, because we are project based. And so when we hire students or teachers to work in our program, the projects that we develop and have them work on, it is ongoing. So it is not something that's done at one time and then they go through. We are doing it with them on a consistent basis in order so that they can deliver the project in a way that is going to really empower the participants in our camp, in our programs, I would say. So that's really what I'm trying to convey to you, and we want to make sure that we understand that your position, we want to make sure that we can work with you in a way that you get a return on your investment. I feel that if we brought in some of the projects the kids built, they built a water turbine. It's about 6 to 7 feet. We provided pictures of that. We can provide evidence of all the kids we saw at our camp. I mean, they programmed the water turbines and we taught them about free energy. We taught them how to C++ and Python. They did an A-stable multi-vibrator. They built so many different things. We had this past summer, we had our 9-year-old built a AI chatbot, sorry. So we are invested to make sure the young people in this community are going to meet the workforce and the challenges of the world, not even tomorrow, it's here now today. And so we want them to be prepared for that. We have invested a lot of our time, a lot of our personal time to design these projects, to build them, to make sure that these kids will have a future so that this community, not just the kids, but the community in general will be prepared for this world of the new technological world. So we want to be able to see if we can find a way to work with you to make sure that, one, this doesn't happen again, and also to ensure how we can make this matter whole.
So we've already made a recommendation that we're gonna bring forward to the entire board. When's our next board meeting?
October 16th, the Wednesday.
So what I would suggest is that you come back on October the 16th, prepared to make a case to the entire board,
Okay.
okay? Because I think we've taken a motion, we've taken action.
Oh,
Make a
okay, I missed it.
make
Okay.
a recommendation. If you want to appeal to the entire board, that to me would be your time to do that.
And just so you know, before we made a recommendation and voted on it, I asked the question, is there anyone here from Scientia? And to give you an opportunity to speak, I would only tell you as one council member, while certainly your words are compelling, and I'm glad to hear that there was a water turbine, whatever. We had a contract with you.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, one vote, contract, the terms of the contract weren't met. And it isn't my $60,000 or $59,300. It's your neighbors. It's some of yours, you know, and I take that very seriously. So Mr. Hannah's point, if you're going to come back to the full council and ask us to, you know, consider something different than what our recommendation was, I would come back. I would come back with a very serious offer, not, you know, we've done all this wonderful stuff. That's just my role.
And I get that, and I just want you to know that what we're doing, there is a return on investment. Your money, the taxpayers' money, is not just money simply going to just have kids play sports and do some fun activities. This is a return on investment that the community will see the fruits of over the next decade. So that's our standpoint, that we are trying to make sure that your return on investment is not just that the kids have a great experience. It's a tangible output that will yield fruit over time. So we understand that we completely understand the position, and we can show you the tangible outputs of many of the things the kids have done. The turbine we took down already, it couldn't fit in our storage, but we had pictures and document everything we've seen. We saw a lot of kids, and parents can come in and tell you the experience they had at our camps. So in our program, not just in summer, weekend workshops, we do after school programs now. So we're teaching 3rd graders Python. You know, they're going to be able to, they will outpace people like Elon Musk in 5 years. Hopefully, but that's the goal. But I'm just saying that you have a return on investment. The taxpayers have a return on investment that for their kids, for this community. And so that's what we're appealing to. And we are absolutely wanting to work with the CAC too, and the taxpayers to make sure that we have a better pathway forward. And I admire Sika. I know sometimes that I can come across as probably overbearing, but I truly want to understand that you're doing a fantastic job as the CAC here, and we want to, all of you are. You have an important job, and we do respect the work that you do. we absolutely 100% do what you do, because you're really benefiting and building a future for the kids in this community. But so to Mr. Hannah's, Superintendent Hannah's, your point, I will come back and I would like the opportunity to speak on the 16th, you said?
October 16th at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock, okay. Okay,
Thank you.
I appreciate you all.
Sure.
Thank you.
Item 10 is committee member comments. Hearing none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, I'm looking forward to my visit. I am. Thank you. Okay. Oh, so you were the one who said.
Yes, yes, Carly.
All right. Okay, so now that you're not getting any, I've come in. Side.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll always.
Oh, it's it. It's getting like.
Yeah. My car and place it all up.
You know, I said.
For example, we've got.
Y'all, I can add some trash. I can tell you.
I told you this once.
That's why.
I am.
I was
I keep these.
It is a small but mighty team, literally our asphalt.
Thank you. Yeah.